I've been playing around with the Super 6 and the Super 8, looking at the differences between them. And while I was thinking about what to demo and how to demo it, it occurred to me that unless you've actually played with one of these, it's not altogether obvious why the UDO Synths are held in such high regard. I see comments about FPGA oscillators and what other synths they're like, what other synths can do, and that these aren't doing anything special. But I think there are a fair few things on these that are unique, and there's nothing I can think of that brings all these pieces together in a single instrument. The interfaces on all their synths is very retro, and the sound can be too, but they're not tied to the past, and I've got loads of features that I thought I'd run through in this demo, just to pull it all together and show what makes them special, rather than running through every single function. Firstly, it looks and feels very familiar to anyone who's used to Jupiters or Junos or any old Roland synths. In fact, it's got Prophet style buttons here as well, hasn't it? So it's got a lot of familiarity before you start, but as soon as you start playing it, it takes you into new territory. Got two FPGA oscillators labeled DVS1 and DVS2. FPGA oscillators work in the megahertz, so they're really super fast oscillators, and that means that you get a nice, crisp, clean top end, but it also means that you can frequency modulate them at audio rates. So they do act very much like analog oscillators. Plus we've got analog drift emulation here. If I load an initial patch, we're into shift. You can hear it's getting super sloppy to the point where you'd need to take it to get fixed. So although you can have it really tight because it is a digital oscillator, or they are digital oscillators, you can do that analog warmth thing. And don't forget, we've got analog filters on this. So the voice circuitry in total can feel really analog. Very imperceptible differences between this and some of my other bits in the studio. This is a 6 dB high pass, and we've got 24 dB resonant low pass. So that's got that Jupiter feel as well, and especially with these modulation options and the key tracking. But if you look over here, we've got the analog waves you'd get on something like a Jupiter. We've got the sine, sawtooth, square, triangle, noise, and then here we've got digital waves. They are digital oscillators, so we have digital waves in here. These are waves, not wavetables, so it's more akin to a Prophet VS than something like a PPG. In here we've got the 32 different waves, so if we hold them, they'll flash, and there's the second bank of 16. So you can do those glassy tones that you're only going to get on a digital synth. And that does have that distinct digital tone, doesn't it? But keeping with the familiar Jupiter feel, we've got two envelope generators over on the right-hand side. They look like ADSRs, but actually this has got an attack hold and a delay hold, and this has got a delay hold as well. You access those via the shift key. So everything we've got on this is a little bit more complex than it might at first appear. Then coming over to the LFO, for example, we've got high frequency mode there. And this high frequency can be tracked as well. And that means it can be used for audio rate modulation. And because it's tracking the frequency, it's a bit like having a third oscillator that you're using to do your modulation like you would on something like the Mini Moog. And then coming along here a little bit further, we've got this Super DDS switch. And this is effectively the UDO secret sauce. If we go back into an initial patch again, and then we put this DDS on, you can hear there that things are spreading out. If we detune them, it sounds like a super saw, but what we've actually got is the main wave plus 6 other waves, so 3 on each side. So it means we've got 7 waves in total, slightly detuned and out of phase. And if we put it into full-on mode, it makes all the 7 oscillators the same volume. So we get a spread where we've got the central wave and it fades out to the left and the right, whereas on full mode, it's just as loud in the left and the right. So if we play an 8-note chord with that, we're going to get 56 oscillators, 7 times 8. So... and then if we add oscillator 2, detune that a bit. We're listening to 64 oscillators there. Got a bit of chorus on. A bit more. Bit of delay. So just a couple of moves from an initial patch and you've got these big, beautiful, wonderful sounding pads. And all that's possible when we're in this binaural mode. And that means we've got separate signal paths through the left and the right. So it says Super 8, it's actually Super 16 because those 8 are replicated on left and right. And that means that we've got not just 8 high-pass filters and 8 low-pass filters, but we've got 16 high-pass and 16 low-pass, which means we've got 32 analog filters on board as well as the oscillators. So there's much more going on in this than you might expect. As I say, it looks a little bit like a Jupiter 6 or a Jupiter 8 or a Super Jupiter, but once you start playing with it, it's got so much more. And part of the beauty of this binaural mode or binaural mode is this left to right phase change on the LFO, and that does what it says on the tin. It changes the phase of the LFO from the left to the right. So if we put that on something like, let's put it on the filter, you can hear it's moving from left to right. And that to me is the very essence of the UDO sound, that swirly loveliness. It's really easy to do on this, really hard to do on other things. And something else I just want to show you that I don't think I've seen demoed anywhere else, and that's that using the cross mod and putting this on sync, oscillator 2 effectively becomes like a wavefolding oscillator. Another little trick it's got up its sleeve, and just to complicate things a little bit more, yes, LFO1 can do audio rate modulation, but so can envelope 1. We've got a loop mode there, and if we make this nice and tight, we can get really, really high rates of modulation there. Oscillator 2 has got an LFO mode, so there's another LFO. We've got LFO1, LFO2 down here, we've got LFO3 there, and if we put the envelope into loop mode, obviously we've got an LFO4 there, and also the LFO can go into, or LFO1 at least, can go into single shot mode, so that can become an envelope. So again, loads of things you can do with the modulation, which brings me to the modulation matrix. Modulation's all accessed via these 16 buttons as well. We've got our Modulation up here, and to assign the sources to something, let's put it into modulation mode, LFO2 to the pulse width or the detune. There we go. So you saw that little flashing LED there. That means it's assigned, and then we'll change the amount of that up or down. Not everything can be assigned. LFO2 to the cross mod, for example, doesn't work, so we didn't get that little display like we got that time there. So not everything can be modulated, but there's an awful lot in there. Again, an UDO thing is that there's no screen, so it's a little bit difficult to decipher what's happening in the modulation matrix if you don't know what the patch is doing in the first instance, but it's so easy to set these things up yourself. I've not found it an issue. I've kept the Super 6. It's not a problem for me, but it's just one of the little quirks. It's one of the things that people do like about it as well. And then just to be thorough, we've got a Juno style controls for the chorus 1, 2, or 3. And then we've got a simple delay here as well, just time and feedback. This doesn't do space echo things. It's a nice, clean digital delay. That'll continue indefinitely if you want it to. There's a foot switch on the back for delay freeze, so you can freeze the delay as well. But yeah, it doesn't do that whole sort of distortion madness, and it stays nice and crisp. Other things we've got is the arpeggiator and the sequencer. It's a 64-step polyphonic sequencer, and down here we've got the voice design as well. So we've got solo, legato, poly, and we've got unison as well, with the binaural mode, of course. So that's the UDO sound in a nutshell. Down here on the left-hand side, we've got some really nice, good fine control of your performance, and you can modulate with aftertouch. You can modulate pushing that forward or bending it, and you can control DDS1, DDS1 and 2, or just 2, upper and lower, or both the upper and lower. Loads of things to fiddle around with there. So there you have it, why the UDOs are so respected, what their special character is, what their special source is, why they sound so good, and why people love them. Well, I hope somebody somewhere found that useful. If you did, please think about subscribing, ring the bell, join me on Patreon. The channel is funded by my wonderful patrons who, for less than the price of a dodgy coffee a month, get access to samples, patches, and tutorials. Also, do check out my affiliate links. If you're going to buy one of these, check out the affiliate links, because I will get a little kickback, basically, another thing that helps to support the channel. Also, do take a look at my starskycar.com website, patches, samples. Oh yeah, and I've got the Prophet VS waves for the Super 6, which will work in the Super 8 and the Gemini in there as well. So thanks very much for staying to the very, very end, and I will see you next time.